Welcome. I have been collecting computer equipment since 1998. Since then, I have managed to acquire roughly 200 laptops and desktops, about 50 printers, and more accessories and books than I care to remember. In 2002, my parents sold our home in Amherst to buy a much larger house in another town. During this move, I decided to shed all my electronic relics to make this move easier and with less clutter. I guess you could say I completely abandoned my hobby. All the equipment you see in this video has been destroyed, broken, lost, and most of it will be quite valuable to a collector today. In 2007, I bought my first home and decided to get back into the fun and enjoyable hobby of computer history preservation once again. I have managed to acquire most of the same equipment I had during my early years of collecting, thanks to fellow collectors, eBay, and coworkers. Collecting computers is more about preserving technology for future generations than it is about money. So before you chuck that worthless 486, early Pentium, Apple, or even some late 90s Macintosh computers, try to find someone who is willing to turn it into a digital time capsule and preserve it for future generations. The first machine we have is my Tandy 3100 486 desktop. This machine was given to me by my father in 1997, and it became the very first computer I ever connected to the internet, and the very first machine I ever put Windows 95 on. This is a 486, originally a 25 megahertz that I had upgraded to a DX266 using an overdrive chip. It had about 12 megabytes of memory before I got rid of it. And I used this machine up until around 1999. What we have here is my Zenith Notebook. I forgot the model number, but it had two floppy drives, 720K each. It had no provisions for a hard disk drive. This one also had it was one of the very first modern style laptops using the same basic layout and configuration as laptops made even until today. Until before then, notebooks came in a variety of form factors. Zenith was known for their lunchbox notebooks made by Morrow, I believe. And this was one of the very first clamshell notebooks that you'd expect to see today. This is an IBM PS2 Model 60. This particular machine had an 80 megabyte hard drive. And it was identical to the Model 80 in every way except for the configuration. It was a 286 with a smaller hard drive, and I believe it had a 1.44 meg floppy. I never did anything with this machine. It really just sat there as a nightstand next to my bed for about a year before I got rid of it when the hard drive failed. Who could forget the Toshiba T1000? This was one of the earlier notebooks from the Toshiba family. It ran a built-in version of DOS. I believe it was DOS 2. It was run completely from ROM, so it was instant on. It had a reflective LCD display, and it was one of the most desirable notebooks, well, of the vintage class, as recently as a few years ago. These notebooks had a lot of built-in applications for word processing, I believe spreadsheets. Very versatile. It was almost like a PDA. And it did have a built-in 720K floppy drive. This particular machine was never functional. I only ran it off an external power source once, and it completely smoked on me. I think I paid about $35 for it. What we have here is basically a family photo of all my equipment when I was in probably 9th or 10th grade. Viewable in this photo is the Toshiba, my Zenith Super Sport 286 notebook, my Zenith 8088 notebook, my two Sinclairs, the Sinclair and the Timex Sinclair, my Fujitsu DX2400 wide carriage dot matrix, a basic generic tower, my Tandy 3100, and my DEC, I think it was a 486 desktop. You can also see my IBM PS2 Model 60 underneath the Zenith Notebook. and a DTK 486 desktop machine. And you can also see somewhere in there my my 280-watt Reveal multimedia speakers, which really kicked ass. This machine really angered me for quite some time. I think I later realized it may have had a memory malfunction. This was a DEC 486 desktop that I intended to use as a spare desktop machine. If I remember correctly, that machine was a 486 with 2 SCSI hard drives. I don't remember what size they were. And it had around 8 or 12 megabytes of memory. And the problem with that machine was I could run Windows 3.1, I could run the installer, but it would never run. It would lock up on startup. And I kept getting weird error messages. I never got that thing to run right. I ended up scrapping it, unfortunately. While I was in high school, I had a series of compact Contour notebooks. This particular one was a black and white passive display with a 4633, no, it was a 4625 processor. It had a 250 meg hard drive and 8 megabytes of memory. I actually ran Windows 95 on this for quite some time. I used it while I was in 10th grade to take notes in class, and it had the optional clip-on trackball. This is one of my best notebooks of that time period. This machine eventually replaced the Tandy 3146. This was my very first Pentium machine, and I found it in a dumpster. The only thing wrong with this system was the PS2 mouse port didn't work, so I had to use a serial mouse. I found it along with about 6 or 7 17-inch CRT monitors, back when those were still worth something. I ended up taking about 3 of those home. This machine ran very well, and I used it until I could afford a better Pentium system. I think I replaced it with a compact Pentium 133. This machine was in use up until 2003. And lastly, we have a Zenith Supersport 286 notebook. This was actually one that I had used in 10th grade. And this particular machine I rebuilt from several different Supersports just like it. This one had an 8088 processor, a 286 processor. It had a 720K floppy drive. It had a 40 megabyte hard drive. I believe it was an SD or some other unusual interface. And it had the optional clip-on battery pack, which weighed about 20 pounds. This particular machine was sold in 2001 to a guy in Zambia, Africa, which I later realized, I didn't know this, but that was one of the very first times I ever heard of the Nigerian scam. They wire you the money plus shipping, you wire back the remainder, and then ship the machine. I didn't get defrauded any money because my account was closed right after that. I didn't use the account much. But nevertheless, it's pretty scary. This was in 2001, and I could have been duped out of a lot of money if I had it then. I don't know whatever happened to the notebook. It was shipped to the UN building. I have no idea whatever happened to it, or if it's still around. Who knows?